Welcome to the Townsmen. This is Tim, and today I'm introducing Leif. So, Leif, say hi.
Hello, I'm Townsman Leif.
All right, Leif. Well, welcome aboard, man. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, been with the Townsman for a little while now. Super bad with dates, but I can tell you it's been more than a few months. It's been a long while, actually. Just a normal guy from the Midwest, Western Oklahoma. I'm married, I have 2 kids, and I have quite the desire for accruing as much knowledge as humanly possible.
Awesome. What kinds of things do you typically take interest in?
A lot of theology. Big on theology. It's kind of replaced my love for science growing up. A lot of the time I'm still well versed in the sciences, mainly like medicine and psychology and stuff, but yeah, when it comes to any sort of spiritualism, not just like the mainstream like Christendom or Eastern theologies such as like Buddhism and such, I definitely like to take more of a esoteric route.
Well, all right. Anything else you want to share? Or should we just jump right in, man?
I'm down to jump right in.
All right. What do you got?
A lot of it is a kind of reframing and restructuring of how we view the spirit and a lot of religions and a lot of overlap between religions, and kind of creating a cohesive framework that can be kind of applied. Essentially, my argument is the spirit can be measured. It's just our modes of measurement are very scientific and only apply to the physical world. But there is cause and effect and things we can kind of extrapolate when we see kind of the practices that humans take through churches, cultural, such as that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, if I might ask.
Yes, sir.
Is there an old way or older ways that we view the world, we view spirituality? You know, like you said, we usually view it through the physical realm. What's wrong with that?
Kind of post World War II, with a hyper-industrialized society, we've kind of thrown all of the kind of metaphysical and a lot of our preternatural senses to the highway, really, and kind of just become stuck in the mud. I think that's kind of what a lot of societies do that have reached kind of a level of prosperity, Rome, Greece, stuff like that. They kind of start taking a cultural sink, to reference the utopian experiments, where you kind of have these negative behaviors allowed to reproduce quite prevalently, and it just ends up kind of taking a downturn for most of society in a lot of broader chunks.
Sure.
I think that reigniting kind of the spiritual lens, understanding that a lot of this stuff, a lot of these religions kind of are still growing, and that our limited capacity in the past has kind of crippled us in the present time, especially through dogmatic like adherence.
Yeah, I got you. That's what's wrong with the old, you might say. What's the alternative? What do we got?
The alternative is kind of just a reframing a lot of this stuff, really. Understanding that there is kind of reciprocative relationship we have with these things that go beyond us, to try to kind of just jump into the deep end ever so slightly. The Trinity is a great example of kind of a formulaic process instead of being solely a singular moment in history through Christ. It is a kind of a rationale in how we interact with our gods, spirits, and other things, where you have the unbegotten, kind of the unbegotten Father in the context of Christianity, where it is a divine antithesis to the mundane. It's very different. Through the self-begotten Son, that's when you kind of reach out up the mountain, and then the unbegotten Father reaches down in turn, and you kind of self-beget. You get this information, and you start transcribing the values of this more spiritual process onto yourself. That's what Christ did. He made the impersonal very personal, find God through him. And then the self-begotten then, do what probably any missionary preacher and evangelized. Went to the Sermon on the Mount, began creating his disciples and equipping them with the kind of metaphysical tools to send forth the word of God. And from there, the disciples created more and more and more. It was kind of a spiritual copulation, to reference an old term from, I believe, Foucault. And from there, that kind of spirit then manifests into reality. That is the spirit of God. It's the begotten Father. And so this formula isn't just Christian dependent. You can really find it and apply it to any sort of process we have with any sort of these, I guess, super spiritual beings, gods, spirits, stuff like that. Sin is kind of an antithetical operation to Christendom because they've kind of created this dialectic between them. Obviously, when you sin, you become more of a sinner, which is kind of a karmic reference, and then you actually purvey more negative things out into the world. Like if you are, to be a little crude, a crack addict, you're probably going to be stealing and purveying negative behaviors onto people who are close to you. And so that kind of goes beyond you and creates a spirit of addiction.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Keep going. Whatever you got, man.
Keep going. Heck yeah. So I pose this question. I pose it to you and many others in the past to help me kind of outline these ideas and work on them and partially beat them as much as I can in order to try to refine them. I always start with, is imagination real? And I'll give anybody listening a moment to kind of ponder that themselves and kind of think of if it, not just like what you imagine to be real, but the faculty of imagination, this act that we do in the world. My argument is very real. You take a tree, it'll never be a table ever. No matter what lightning hits it, a volcano, nothing, that'll never become a table. It's only when we take this slight inclination in the back of our head and apply energy and will in order to create it and manifest it onto the item that we are sculpting, constructing. And then we can always have that encoded information of table. And somebody that walks up and is familiar with tables, we have them our whole lives. I'm sure as kids, we all smacked our noggin on the corner a few times. You'll see it, and that encoded information is immediately decoded. You're like, that's a table. I know its form and function, what it's made of even most of the time. And we kind of inscribe so much information on so many things. I think that's another problem with the material world is we've gone very numb to the amount of information we transcribe onto objects.
How so?
Like the amount of, technology for one. That is some crazy advanced aspects of information. It's a multi-connected, own biome almost of interconnected processes. Even just like water bottles, everything that we have at our disposal and our fingertips is carrying the mark of man. We have a plethora of things where we inscribe our information. Traffic, for example, it's complex sigilism that we've been completely engrossed in, where it has a cause and effect relationship of encoded information where everybody takes it in, decodes it, and acts respectively to the laws of traffic. It's a mass formation ritual in a sense.
Okay.
I think that's a kind of the crux of the argument here is we've grown numb to kind of the magic, to use a fancy word for it, of kind of the mind of man and how we applicate our will to go beyond us entirely. If for churches, for example, that's kind of the telestic place of God, and it has a mark, to quote Michael Scott, if God's not real, why do we have all these churches? It's unknowingly kind of prolific, where we have these constant reminders and effigies of a thing higher and beyond us, and that creates a reciprocative effect. People attend church, shapes society, shapes how we act, our relationships with each other, our children, relationships with our neighbors. And in saying so, I think that kind of every god is real. I think there is just bad ones and good ones. And to get along to the idea of the kind of larger scale information kind of reciprocative relationship, let me try to frame this.
Yeah, take your time, man.
Kind of taking a step back, I guess, to the kind of traffic analogy. We have these kind of constraints that we create in a metaphysical sense, where we have laws, order, all these things are purely informational. They're completely, I don't want to say fabricated, because in the Constitution a lot of these are self-evident things that can be quite clear, the commandments and such. Don't murder, it's bad. And so we inscribe these things and put incredible value on them, value enough to uphold them at any cost a lot of the time. Obviously, violence and physicality is a truth to our nature, and we use that pretty heavily, but it's an enforcement of more of a spark at the back of the head. Justice, vengeance. Vengeance is kind of the root ancestor of justice, and a lot of that is very spiritual, emotional, and it's kind of evolved and grown with us over time. And we've rooted a lot of that into spirituality. And I think that when we get to a hyper material setting, we start to lose our grasp and touch on that. I think we can see in kind of the postmodern era, morality is quite gray.
Mm-hmm. For people that might not be as versed in this kind of stuff, I know you and I've been yapping on these things. I think we're just at about a year, just to kind of address how long you've been at the Townsmen. I think it's been, almost a year, I think, in December, which is today. So that's awesome. But for those who aren't quite as familiar, we're into the pretty esoteric, deep side of things. I know It took me quite a bit of onboarding to understand what the hell you're talking about. But for those that maybe are lagging a little bit, is there a very grounded, simple way of understanding this? And I mean, if you need to, you can do the thing we do with some of our new guys that join in our speakeasies.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you mentioned earlier about asking if imagination's real, we can simulate it together if you want. You could just run me through it.
Absolutely, yeah. I will begin the process of posing you a question. Is the imagination real?
Depends on what you mean by real.
As a faculty that can be observed by self and others.
Okay. Imagination, I think, seems pretty self-explanatory, so I would say yes.
Gotcha, I agree. If we're following along the lines of imagination being a tangible faculty, which by all intents and purposes it must be, because if it didn't exist, we wouldn't have it, kind of thing. It's a part of the universe, and it'd be. So if we were to take the idea that information can exist, even if its smallest output, even like a byte, to compare it to technology, which is just a simple facsimile of creation, we can understand that through the application of energy, we can carry that information much further. Even just by simply speaking of it, you can kind of send that message out, and people who can decode it, can understand it, will then carry it with them, and it can just travel. Now, if we were going to apply that to physical effigies, like back to traffic stop signs, stuff like that, we can see that information in its purest form can't subsist, so we have to root it into the material. So we build stop signs, churches, all these things that are iconic representations of complex ideas, or even simple ideas. A stoplight, red, stop, green, go. Very simple, all the way to very complex ideas such as spiritual iconography, like Christ crucified and whatnot.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on board.
And so to really boil it down, I kind of do this just for the more, I don't want to sound pretentious in saying it, but the uninitiated.
Yeah, that's fair.
Our gods are kind of as real as we make them. And I mean that in just the material. To say that they're not real beyond the divine is, not that we can know, but I would just personally believe that not to be true. So really, we act as a motile force in order to exact the properties of our more divine inspirations. And that goes for the negative aspects too, war. I mean, we all hear like Greek tales of war gods and stuff like that, but that's a lot of information. It's strategic. It seems like chaos, but in reality, that is a order beyond understanding, which you and I could understand as chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is
we've talked about that.
And we really love our effigies to the war god. Tanks, mortars, all these. I mean, we're getting really advanced, like LRAD systems, stuff like this, the things that we're starting to create really kind of deify war because it's powerful. I mean, if you're caught in it, you have no control. All that information, all that power is just beyond you a lot of the time, even beyond the individual most of the time, unless you're kind of at the top of that hierarchy.
Yep.
That goes for our good gods as well. I think Christendom has done it very well. Kind of bring it a little more personal. I am a disciple of Christ. I love his teachings. I live Christ-like. I'm a father, a husband, try to do well and be good. But I don't know if I would call myself a Christian, just because I think that there's some flaws in the system.
Yeah, for sure. I'm on board with you on that one. So digging into information a little bit, I know we've talked about words and where language comes from and, kind of how, and I'll summarize it quickly and you can nosedive into it, of all of the words that we don't have yet. They're still there in some form. And then eventually with energy put into them, they're sort of created or begotten, if you will. So you want to dive into that?
Better word for that one. Absolutely. So we have what I kind of break down the information, I field realm, whatever you want to call it. If you break it down into the chaos state and the ordered state, all information that will be, can be, will be is how I should phrase it. Gods in the future, words that we don't have yet. Like if you try to think of a word that we don't have for another 5 years, you can bring it forth unto the ordered state. So, for example, just like in material science, a lot of the times that, like way back, we didn't know air was a thing. Like it didn't have matter. It didn't take up space.
Right.
And it was only until we perceived it, gave it name, analyzed it, gave the parts of it names, that did we really start to shift our entire framework of understanding of what air is. And that kind of goes with words and more intellectual properties as well. Once we start ordering these things, I would argue that Christ kind of ordered his divine father in the context of Christianity from the chaos state, which is just an order beyond comprehension, I guess you could say, perception, and then brought that forth and acted upon it. And I think that all information kind of falls into this. And so if information's a physical is a rough word for that one, a tangible thing, we can kind of give myself some leeway here, a little wiggle room. If it's a tangible thing, I can argue that it can be measured, and that's the hard part, because all of our tools are heavily reliant on material, atomic stuff. Energy is very kind of easy to understand now with how advanced we've gotten into it. And from my perception, I can kind of understand that there's a dialectic between information and energy. It's kind of all the same stuff when you get to the very, very, very base of it. But this matter, the stuff, the mud of man, is very high energy, but it's low information. It's kind of dumb. Information is smart, but has very, very low energy. And I think that a lot of our, creations, how we even evolved, the operation of tools and stuff, is kind of this synthesis of information and material.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. Just take a quick break here and shamelessly throw some ads out there. So if you guys are enjoying this podcast episode or have been enjoying other episodes and you'd like to get involved or you'd like to contribute, just follow the links below. We've got a Discord. You can jump in on our Speakeasy Saturdays at 8 p.m. Central every Saturday. Or also on our Discord, you could check out what merch we have for sale. We've got some pretty awesome t-shirts, some cool caps, some pretty spicy ones, along with a lot of cool Founding Fathers stuff and people like that are worth looking up to in this time. So I'd be happy to have you over there and come check it out. Let's get back to it.
So the Elohim idea that Tim and I kind of for hours kind of talked about, defined terms, and expanded upon Elohim in reference to the Bible, obviously, and more of the Hebrew and Aramaic translations. Elohim is kind of a divine plural. It's in reference to many of the divine things. And so we kind of co-opted the word, to put it lightly, and ratified it into the divine realm, the mind of God within the kind of universe existence. It's a forest of trees is the best way I can begin to illustrate the picture for you. Gods are all here. All spirits, all things are here that are kind of intangible in the mundane without any sort of, I guess, motility to attune to. There's big trees. I believe we can all agree that Yahweh is a massive tree. Everybody kind of knows of it. Some are more intimate with its branches than others. You have old withering trees. Obviously the pagan gods have been on a decline for a very long time.
Right.
There's dead trees that no one even know the names of, and there's saplings. I think that we've kind of seen since the kind of, I guess, 1800s is kind of where I'll put the pin in for now, of where we started seeing a lot of new faith and new religions start becoming more prominent and traveling.
Right.
And this forest can be walked. When you start seeing the trees, now it's expansive. You cannot see the forest for the trees at all. Like, you are somewhere stuck in the middle. You can begin to map it out and understand it, but it is not just linear. It encompasses potential as well.
Right.
I think that a lot of the things we take from that are what separate us entirely from animals pretty heavily.
How so?
I think it is. So obviously, nature, to get real abstract, is our mother. She brought us
Hmm.
forth and created us and have given us bodies, and we're thankful. But I think that the father, the spiritual father of man, has given us a crazy, powerful gift to have a relationship with information beyond any other being on this planet.
Okay.
And I think that our ability to create at such complex stages sets us quite apart. I think it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just for anyone curious, going back to where Elohim is at,
Hmm.
as an example, and this is just the easiest one, it is, in the beginning of Genesis 1:1, where it says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." The word we have in English as God is in its original Hebrew, Elohim. And that's where that word comes from. And it literally translates to gods, plural.
And it's in reference to angels and other kind of spiritual entities throughout the Bible.
Right, yeah.
I think that humanity, that kind of gets me going on a point here. We have a very, very, I don't know if it's a curse or a blessing, but we personify things very, very heavily. If you look at old gods, such as like the sun god and stuff, we'll use Greek Apollo, for example. We
Sure.
take these human traits and elements, these virtues, vices, these things, and we amalgamate it with a natural phenomenon to deify it, and with a collection of higher belief and the effect of its reciprocative relationship with humans, such as like the temples we create, the way we structure ourselves. The more embedded into our existence it becomes, the more, I guess, powerful, I guess you could say, because it is an activation. It is, I guess, a principality of energy being acted upon in the name of that god or whatever. But what we see unique is these divine gods, such as Yahweh, for example. He is just truth, light, and love. And what's unique about this, there is no necessary physical effigy except for creation and everything itself to really root that in. And I believe that's an incredible kind of fascinating take on it. And I believe that's one of the reasons why it became so prolific and kind of traveled so well and succeeded, really.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Pivoting a little bit, given an understanding of gods and such things through this lens, and having this more, I guess,
ironically
just esoteric,
material.
Yeah, like it's, these things are so tethered to, we think of, for instance, like, science and religion are very separate things.
Right.
And I used to think that in middle school and a little bit. I remember having an after school thing where it was Christians in a room in our, like, one of our science teacher's room, and we would talk about God, and it was basically just church, just for an hour or so after school on a once a month or whatever. And I presented a thing where it's like God versus science, as if they're
right
against
Opposing
each other.
factions, correct.
Right.
Yeah, and when they act like it a lot of the time, Christians, like apologetics and stuff, really try to attempt to loop in science into a lot of things, and they cling viciously to like Old Testament myth and whatnot, which I do believe at the end of the day is kind of foolish, but I believe they can be reconciled. I know more in the esoteric kind of camp that's taboo, but I'll stick with my guns there.
Yeah, absolutely. But as I've learned more, gotten older, talked to more people, especially you, the more I've realized, and reading a lot of transcendentalism, the more I've come to understand that these things are not separate. You take science, you take religion and all of the different other religions, and these are, I think, tools, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, or you can polish it, obviously, but I think they're just different tools to understand reality. And there's different dimensions of it. So, like, science is a tool to understanding physical reality. Religion, probably supernatural phenomenon.
Right. I think to zero in on a tool real quick, since you mentioned those, I think that framing a lot of these things as tools is a great idea. I will zero in on invocation, for example. I will always be talking in Christian context because, I mean, it's the water we swim in. Everybody can recognize it. I think that Christianity kind of lost its kind of sense of magic, in a sense. The invocative process where you become Christ-like, the transubstantiation ritual of sacrament where, you consume the blood and the body of Christ in order to be as him and find God through him. And that kind of changes between denominations, obviously. Eastern Orthodoxy has a pretty different take. They still take part in that ritual like Catholics do, but the glorification and the sanctification are a bit different. Obviously, we have some Protestant chapters that kind of practice those similar things. Baptism's pretty widespread, but these rituals have a purpose. It's not like you just do them and, congratulations, key to heaven, right on. The purpose for them is to become Christ-like. You're invocating Christ in his immortalized soul and body into yourself. You become an extension of Christ. And even when you die, you are still a part of Christ. So you replace parts of you, your sinful nature, your baser desires, stuff like that, and you replace it with a purely intellectual thing. It is pure information, and it's very spiritual. It arouses things. It arouses change. There's an actual observable cause and effect. There's that joke that Christ is in prison because that's where a lot of people find him.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing. It's serving its purpose. It is making repentant people find an avenue to change themselves for the better. And I think that's one of the purposes of spirituality, is to give us a measure of control over our kind of mindful nature.
Yeah, this is just a thought, and I'm pretty sure we've yapped about it at some point in time, but is Christ sort of like the alchemical mercury? And by that I mean that which is it's the tool that transmutes, if you will.
He's a catalyst. Yeah.
Okay.
God the Father is the gold. He's the source, the goal. But Christ definitely acts as a self-imposed catalyst. He made the impersonal personal, and I just reading his works and stuff, I feel like he knew that. I think he knew he was making himself a catalyst so that everybody would have a bridge unto the Father.
Yeah, he is hermetic, I think, in that way. If not sealed like we think of hermetic, but like Hermes, as in the old god that is the messenger of the gods, if you will. But it's a little bit different. Yeah, it's a little bit different because it's not just information; it is like information that is a pathway.
Right. It's an entire encoded process that really, because. Try kind of just to snitch on myself here, I don't think Christ physically resurrected, but I do think through his practices, and if I would be so scandalous to say ritual, he transcended death. We're 2,000 years later, and millions of people still practice the invocative process where Christ is a catalyst. And like the Eastern Orthodoxy, you become a part of Christ. You become an extension. You become an archetypal manifestation of an archetypal manifestation. It's actually quite fascinating.
Yeah.
By all means, everybody, comment, beat my ideas, beat the crap out of them. That's the only way I can really get better. And I'd love to see people's different perceptions and kind of understandings of the things that I have to say. And I promise you, it'll get more refined.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the best ways to do that is, if anyone's listening and wants to talk to Leif or myself or about these ideas, we have ways to do that. Hop in the Discord. We've got links below and in the channel someplace. And every Saturday night, we've got a speakeasy Saturday at 8 p.m. Central. Jump in. We usually have a topic. Sometimes a little bit of bird walking before and afterward, and just get into talking about these things. They're deep. They're really complicated. And to be able to ask questions that pop in your mind is really important. And as good as, commenting on a YouTube video or something like that may be, it's really different to actually have a proper conversation, not necessarily face to face, but voice to voice,
Makes a world of difference. Yeah, it takes 2 points of contact to register depth, honestly.
Right.
So the more depth I can get, the better I can get at enunciating my ideas and refining them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And one of you might have the missing link.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just 2 guys. So chances of better information or missing pieces or anything like that being added to the puzzle is likely. It's impossible for it not to be the case. I am so glad I finally got to have you on. Yeah.
Oh,
if
hell
you've
yeah.
got any, full send.
I appreciate it. It's been a long time coming.
It has.
It's nice and chaotic being a dad.
I can only imagine.
But they're little angels still.
Yep.
But yeah, I do appreciate it. I hope that I didn't seem too scatterbrained. Once I get going, I can't stop pacing and starts just pouring out of me. So I really look forward to anybody's ideas, thoughts, or criticisms. And until next time.
Well, everyone, this is the Townsmen, and thanks for being here. Talk to you later.